friend of mine, Joyce Banda. I'm delighted that we've got an audience joining us from around the world. Thank you for participating in this event. Joyce will, of course, be known to all of you in her capacity as the former president of Malawi. She was the second woman to lead a nation in Africa. And of course, I will be talking to her about that today. But she has a lifetime track record of activism, philanthropy, entrepreneurship, and we will be exploring those things as well. And I'm also delighted to say she's a patron of the Global Institute for Women's Leadership. Joyce, welcome. Terrific to have this time with you.
Thank you very
Joyce,
much for having me.
Thank you. Joyce, I'd like to start our conversation at the very beginning because, as they would say, it's a very good place to start. And I want to ask you about your childhood. And I'd particularly love you to share the wonderful story that you've told me in the past about how you came to be named Joyce. And I'd like you to talk to us too about your life as a young girl. Did you think you might end up being a leader one day?
Yeah, I was born in a village. I come from the southern part of Malawi, in a village called Malawi village in Domasi in Zomba. And there were no hospitals in that area. So babies were born at home. But I just happened to be born at the time, April of 1950. A British nurse had come to Malawi to establish a clinic in the area where I came from. And so I was one of the few children, babies that were born in that hospital. I come from a tradition, a matrilineal system of marriage, where when a man marries, he moves from his village to go and live in the wife's village. So you find that in my tradition, women are very strong because women live together. Your grandmother, your aunties. Gender-based violence is not as much as in other tribes, in other traditions. But one particular incident, one particular tradition in this tradition of ours is that when you are born, a girl child, a first grandchild who is female will take the name of the grandmother. So at any time when your grandmother dies, even when you are 15, you become the matriarch of the family because everybody will call you mother from the day you are born. So in my particular case, being the eldest granddaughter, I was supposed to be called Hilda because my grandmother's name was Hilda. So here is a clinic in the village, newly established. My mother is taken to that hospital in labor, a baby is born. The following day, the British nurse came for her rounds and found my grandmother carrying this baby and asked, what is the name of this baby going to be? And in her excitement, I think that this huge, she always told me she was huge, this huge, smartly dressed in her white dress, British nurse, talking to her, she said, ask her what her name is. And this lady said, my name is Joyce. Why? She said, well, then that's the name that this child is going to be called. She's going to be called Joyce. And the lady was interested to know why. And my grandmother said, well, because I want her to grow up to be as important as you. I want her to grow up to build as many clinics as possible in Malawi. And what she forgot was she was denying me of my inheritance. And she even went further to ask her, what does Joyce mean? And I'm told this lady told her it means joy, means happiness. She said, even better. So I ended up being called Joyce instead of being called Hilda. But then what that meant, yes, I've grown up to build the clinics that she talked about, but I was denied the inheritance that I was supposed to inherit from her, to be called Hilda and to become the matriarch of the family. As a matter of fact, now my daughter took my mother's name and she's Edith, and we all look up to her as the matriarch of the family, not me.
That is a fantastic story.
But I think that I've read somewhere, and anybody can check. It was during the time I was at the Woodrow Wilson Center, 2015, 2016, researching on the participation of African women in leadership, that I bumped into this information that says leaders are born, but they're born with only 30% leadership traits. and that society and the community and the world must add on the 70%. This child, this girl or boy child must go to school. The community must support this child. This child must have mentors. This child must be motivated. This child must be encouraged. This child must go all the way to tertiary education if she's going to be that leader that she was meant to be. So in my particular case, there were so many things that happened between my 0 and 10 years of age that began to awaken my family to say there's something special about this child. And I didn't know until one time at 10 years old, my article on the importance of girls' education was published in the Malawi news. And my father was very proud about that, was telling his best friend, I don't know, have you heard about that article? And giving him that piece of paper to read. And my uncle saying, you know, I don't know what I see in this child, but this child is destined for greatness. And while my father laughed in that conversation on that day, because I was present, he laughed. He even asked, what can she do? She's just a girl. But my uncle too said, yes, but I don't know, but I just feel it. I'm just so fortunate that throughout my life, my growing up, my dad would remind me, remember what Uncle John said? You're destined for greatness. And why I'm saying this, because it's important for those that are raising children, that what you say to a child between 0 and age matters and sticks. And that you, again, between 0 and 10, in an African setup, we must pay attention to the life of the girl child and try to create an enabling environment for this child, assuming she's born with the 30% leadership traits, to open up her path and encourage her and empower her to grow up to become the leader that she was meant to be.
Now, thank you for sharing that, and such a wonderful story how you got your name, and also the possibilities that were raised with you as a child about becoming a leader. I think.
Yeah, because Julia, as I told you, I don't know if I've told you before. I don't know why, because of what my uncle said. He would always encourage my father was encouraged now to begin to build me up, whatever his friends said to him. And one time, he was in the Malawi police band. He was a musician. He played the trombone. And so once in a while, they would be invited to State House, play music for the first couple. In those days, it was the governor representing the Queen and his wife. And they would sit there and the band would be playing on the grass on the lawn while they listened to the music, whether it was a party or just having tea. And this particular time, my dad took me. And his friends in the bus were laughing at him. Where are you taking this girl child? And I sat there and watched the first couple having their cup of tea, while my father was playing music with his colleagues, far away from where the first couple was. But what I remember forever is me sitting there and watching that couple and asking, what must it feel like to be the first couple? And how do you feel sitting there? And what does it take to be a president or a head of state? And you know, Julia, many years later, that was my State House. I lived in that house. Yeah, so sometimes I strongly believe that what you do to a girl child or a boy child, to a child, what you say to that child matters in building up their character. Yeah.
Absolutely. On your journey from childhood to the presidency, though, there were many, many challenges along the way. You weren't able to go to university because of your family's financial position, so you didn't go from school to university. And you actually ended up as a young wife and mother in an abusive marriage. Now, in having this experience, you're not alone. A 2017 report from Malawi's Ministry of Gender revealed that 53% of married women face domestic violence at the hands of their husbands. Can you tell us about what you have learned in your own life about domestic violence, and politically, what do we need to do to end it?
I think first, let me say that when you are a girl child, and there are so many, as you rightly say, that may not end up achieving or attaining the education that they want because of circumstances that, like I found myself in. You can keep that dream and you can still achieve it. Because later in life, I went back to school. I did my first degree in gender and development. And then I went on to Royal Roads University in Victoria, Canada, and did my master's in leadership. So it doesn't matter at what point you go back to school, because for me, what I remember most is the pain that I couldn't go. Because in those days in Malawi, we used to be selected to go even to secondary school or to university. And I was one of the best students in my school. So my 4 colleagues went and I didn't go. And I knew that I must do that later. And I'm just so thankful that I got married to a husband who understood that and helped me to achieve my dream, because I didn't need to, but it was something that I wanted to do. That's number one. So my advice to women would be, if you don't get that education in the beginning, because that happens a lot to African women because of their situation at household level, they must keep that dream and they can achieve it anytime later in life. I wanted to say that in as far as gender-based violence is concerned, I believe that the cause of that, especially among African women, and all women, because now COVID-19 has shown us that what has increased during COVID-19 is gender-based violence. And nobody is explaining to me why. But I think that when women are disempowered, women don't have education, women don't have economic empowerment. That is one of the challenges they have. And that is one of the causes of domestic violence, because they are not making contribution towards the household. And so that is why, for me, I have spent my life trying my level best to assist women gain social and political empowerment through business and education. That's my mission in life, because we can empower women economically. They can in turn send their girl child to school, but they can also begin to make choices in their lives about themselves. They can even begin to say, I can't have any more children, but this body can't have any more children, knowing that they can live. I mean, I could give examples all day long, but I have actually seen women begin to contribute towards decisions at household level, making choices about their own lives, and providing better nutrition, better health to their families because they are economically empowered. And when that happens, the first thing that happens in a research that we did, that was supported by the USAID in 1999, revealed that when women are economically empowered, they even gain respect at household level. They begin to contribute towards decision-making at how, and they can choose to leave an abusive situation because they're economically empowered. So that is what I learned, because in my case, I was too young. I was 21, and then by 26, I had 3 children, and then ended up 10 years in an abusive marriage. And I made up my mind that I was going to leave. And you didn't leave your marriage in those days. But when I left, I also decided that I was not going to stand by and watch another woman be abused if I can help it. Yeah, so for me, those are the causes, main causes. But I think the solutions that I have found are that, one, there's an organization called Think Equal. Think Equal was founded by Leslie Odwin, who is a very good friend of mine, who directed the film called Daughters of India, after the girl was gang raped. And Leslie Odwin have worked with me, and I'm a patron on Think Equal. And what we feel, what we believe is that rights education should start as early as possible for the girl child and the boy child. The boy child, so he must acknowledge and appreciate and value the girl child, but the girl child must also know that it's not okay to just stand by and be abused, because that is inculcated in us as girls at a very early age. Nobody has explained to me why a woman will till the land, prepare the land, plant, nurture the crop, harvest, store, process, cook, and then serve, and then eat last and least. But this is what a girl child will grow watching, and then it becomes okay. So providing early child education to children, both boys and girls, but also within that education, providing rights education from age 3. Number 2, I think, as I said earlier, economic empowerment, making sure that the woman is economically empowered. But thirdly, I have found as a leader myself that political will is also very important. It is the laws that you put in place. It is the structures that you put in place and the facilities that you put in place and how strong your governance institutions are to make sure that there are laws that protect the woman. In my case, when I got into politics, when I was appointed Minister of Women and Gender, the first bill that I took to Parliament to be passed into law in 2006 was the domestic violence bill. Yeah.
Yes. So you left an abusive marriage yourself. You became an activist around women's economic empowerment, knowing from your own life that gave women more choices, more ability, particularly the ability to leave an abusive marriage. You subsequently remarried, and your husband was very supportive of you and your career and your further education. So across all of this journey, you're now in politics. And then in May 2009, you became the first woman vice president of your nation. And then in 2012, when the president died in office, you became president, the second woman to lead a nation in Africa. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the president of Liberia, was the first. Now, I know that at the time there were a lot of political manoeuvres to try and deny you the presidency, but rather than focus on that, what I would love to hear about was your experience of being the first woman president. Were you treated differently just because you're a woman? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think in answering this question, let me go back a little bit because this conversation is very important. In that I live in a society in Africa where sometimes society exerts a lot of pressure on us to remain married because that's the right thing to be. You must be a married woman. You can be single, that's fine, and out of choice you can do that. But sometimes, because traditionally that's where we're coming from, we are pressured to stay in abusive situations. So I think let me start from there to say it's okay to leave. And in my case, I left. And when I left, I went shopping for a better husband because then I was even more mature and at an age where I could negotiate. And by then I was economically empowered. So I could choose to get married or not get married again. So because people don't even talk about being divorced. It is taboo. They even ask me again and again, why do you talk about it? Because people don't know. I said, no, if I can talk to one woman who is going through that bit of her decision, she must know that some people have done it and started all over again. You can fall, but you must rise again and start running again. So that, I wanted to say that. Secondly, then I went into politics. I went into cabinet. The first day I went into Parliament, I was appointed Minister of Women and Children. Then 2006, after passing the domestic violence bill, I was appointed Foreign Minister. And then I served as Foreign Minister for 3 years. Then my president asked me to run with him. So we ran together, and then we were both elected because we are both on the ballot paper. And he told me, because I had declined. It was through my husband that he pressured me to accept to run with him. And the reason why I had declined was because of the way he had treated the previous vice president, who was at that time in court on drummed up charges, treason charges. But then in the end, he convinced me. And what you need to do to convince me is when you talk about what I love to do most. And he told me, he says, tell me what other job can give you the platform to look after the poor, because you like working with grassroots people. And I said, yes, that's right. So I accepted. And so we ran together and we campaigned together. But what he told Malawians was that I will groom her to take over from me in 2014 when I leave office. So all Malawians, I mean, that's the first time a president has won by 65% in this country. So everybody knew it was the women's fault. So we ran together and we won together, and then unfortunately he passes on. In Malawi, the constitution is very clear. The president becomes incapacitated or passes on, the vice president will take oath immediately. In my case, it didn't happen that way. So you said, rather than dwelling on that, let's talk about what it felt like to be a president, but allow me to dwell on that, because that's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is that sometimes we shall get that opportunity. As a woman, you've run with your president, now an opportunity has come for you to become president, or in any event, fulfilling their promises to us as women. When they use us to get to where they want to get, and then they want to use us to get there, knowing that we have the clout and we have the following, you must never cow down. You must never accept that that can be taken away from you. You must never accept to be abused. So if that ever happens to any other woman, stay strong and stay firm. So what I did in my case, I mobilized the international community. And then I mobilized my fellow activists in my country. And I mobilized former leaders. And I mobilized my favorite people at grassroots. Because I have always said that leadership is like a love affair. You must fall in love with the people yourself, and the people must fall in love with you. And in my case, I fell in love with the grassroots people. Everybody knows in this country, Malawi, that my favorite people are those that are at grassroots. If there's anything I can do every single day to change the life of one of them at a time, that's what I do. And I'm going to do that job until I go down the grave. So they know too. So they love me in return. So I mobilized those as well. They had to be aware what was happening to their friend. So they started marching into the long way. And the army in Malawi also took position. But what I'm talking to the fellow woman. A fellow woman must know that when that happens, you can't retreat. You have to forge ahead, stay the course, and stay strong and demand what is yours. Number two, then you said to me, so what did it feel like to be the president? I got into office at a time when the situation in Malawi was really bad. It was really bad, I mean, economically. On the first day I got into State House, there was no fuel for a day. There was no electricity, there was no water, and there was no food for 2 million people. Companies were operating at 35% and people being laid off. So that's when I come into office. So what it felt like, you ask the clear question, what does it feel like? For me, that was what I was carrying on my head. And because I'm a woman, I had to prove that even in the midst of that chaos, you can come out victorious. On the first day to go to the funeral of my president, fuel to take me there with my officials to his resting place was donated by the president of another country, Zambia. President Sata donated because there was nothing in this village. And that is the reason why in 100 days, people counted, that's the first time people have celebrated 100 days in this country. And I've never heard about it anywhere else, but here we even printed cloth because all those challenges had disappeared in 100 days. In 100 days, we had fuel flowing every day. In 100 days, we had electricity back. And by 100 days, we had started distributing food to those that were in need. And so for me, the lesson that I learned from that work during that 100 days, and that anybody else can learn from me, is that the attributes of a good leader, whether you're a man or woman, are the ability to put together a good team. So that was the advantage that I had. I was treated differently in the 72 hours when they denied me the opportunity to take oath as per the Constitution. But the moment I became president and was able to choose a good team, then I can never pretend that I had any hardships. And I can never say to anybody, this man treated me this way or that way. I mean, I must ignore what happened in the opposition. The opposition will call you names, will say anything. Propaganda will always be there. But as far as the job was concerned, I had a very, very good team. In fact, when I was alerted that people were stealing money in government, one of the finest economists in Malawi was working at the IMF. His name is Dr. Maxwell Mpezalamba. I called him and told him, drop everything and come back. Help me to clean up. I've just bumped into corruption here and we are going to fight that together. So come back. And he resigned from IMF and came back. So I was very, very fortunate that I had a very, very good team. And I'm proud to say that when I look at what we were able to achieve in the time that I was there, I am extremely grateful to God, because I just, sometimes people now talk about it. My president was actually telling me that what people tell him, people talk about the fact that we were able to build 22 holding shelters at all government clinics for women to travel there 2 weeks before labor so that they deliver in the hands of trained personnel. We were able to reduce maternal death by 32% in that time. And we were able to grow our economy by 6.3%. The companies that had been operating at 35% were now operating at 85%. And the 2 million people that had no food, we were able to harvest 3.9 million metric tons with 1.9 million overproduction. So I had a good ride. I had a lot of detractors. I cannot even begin to tell you the assassination attempts twice. In one of them, my security was killed. But if I look at the job, I am truly very, very satisfied.
Well, thank you for talking to us about your direct experience. I'd like to broaden the canvas now and talk about women's leadership more generally in Africa. You know, there are a number of women. I know that you're very familiar with the number of women who have led governments or been heads of state in Africa. Do you think it's getting easier for women because there are others who have gone before you, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf? And what do you think it means that African nations, a number of them, have had women presidents and the United States has not?
It's not getting easier. It's tough. And I don't want to pretend to women that it's a bed of roses. No, it's tough. But what I have always said to my fellow women, we have to do it. We have to participate in leadership. But I think the advantage that Africa has that other parts of the world don't have, including America, is that we historically were leaders. We led our nations before colonization. In fact, if you read our history all over the place, they will tell you that it was colonization in other instances that drew us back, because those that colonized us did not have those systems in their nations. But Ghana had a woman leader, Egypt had a woman leader, Malawi had a leader. I mean, we had women leaders before the white people came on our continent. Secondly, even now, if you look closely at us, president after president are appointing 50-50, half-half in their cabinets, including African Union, has achieved parity a long time ago. The country with the highest number of women in parliament is on the continent of Africa. So, well, I don't want to talk about America because I don't understand what happens there, but I know for sure that Africa is doing well. And I've told my fellow Africans not to feel bad about ourselves, not to bash ourselves, because we are doing fine. And the way we are doing it is the approach. And I've always said that maybe the rest of the world has one or two things to learn from Africa and Asia. Because in our case, we practice our own type of feminism. I mean, rather than being confrontational and fighting with our men and marching on the streets, we engage them. We believe that if they are the problem, they must be the solution too. So we sit down with them and then we engage them. And I don't know whether it is our history that also helps. I find that they don't struggle a lot to accept that a woman can be a leader. The problem is now when we start and then we perform and then they find, oh, then we are pushed out. So I have made this submission to my fellow women across Africa as we celebrate Beijing Plus 25, that what we need to sit down and look at, because in 1995, we decided we're going to come back to Africa and reclaim our position and get into leadership. And that's what that we have done, and we've done well, because now we have 6 women that have been presidents on the continent, with the Tanzanian one the other day. But I think what we did not discuss, what we have not found a way of doing, is to assist one another, to support one another, to stay in the job. Because we get there, and then the fight starts from the oppositions. And now, what I find about women leaders is that we get into leadership to serve, number one. Number two, not for the power. We get there to serve, and when we get there to serve, we want to do what is right. We don't want to compromise. Now, when those that get into leadership for the power, they will overlook some of the negative stuff, because as long as power is maintained. Now, in our particular case, you will not see corruption and just watch it. You want to fight it. But fighting corruption, as GIWL has written, fighting corruption is dangerous. But we don't know how to overlook that. So we fight it, and then it backfires, and then we pay heavy prices for it. But what I know for sure is that women leaders come in to serve, and most of them are servant leaders. So Africa has done well. And sometimes for vice presidents, there are 2 a penny. I mean, they're all over Africa, many. I mean, the number is big. So we've done extremely well, but there's a lot of work to be done. And you have to watch some of our campaigns. I mean, some people will be listening to me now and saying, is she talking about the Africa that we know? Because women are beaten, women are stripped naked during campaigns. We go through a lot of hardships. They fight us. The media, the things they write about us. But all I'm saying is we have to look at the positive side and decide that, are we going to participate or not? What we have to focus on is engaging our men to open space at the table to allow us to sit there too, at the policy formulating table. That's where we belong.
And looking at a very recent example of leadership in Africa, I don't want you to comment on the politics of Tanzania. I'm sure you would not want to do that, but there has been a similar transition of power in the sense that there was a female vice president who has just become president because her predecessor died due to COVID-19. How is the new president of Tanzania, the first woman to lead that nation, how is she addressing that issue of being the first?
President Samia Suluhu Hassan and President Magufuli worked together for 6 years. And what some of us looking from far, what we saw is a very close relationship of a president and vice president that worked very well together. Because President Magufuli didn't travel, and all the travels on all UN and name it, Vice President Samia who used to go. If you ask some of us in Africa now, we will tell you that President Magufuli was one of the best presidents on the continent of Africa. So that being the case, here was the vice president who worked with this man for 5 years. The 2 of them worked together. What I see is that she went into the job, and those challenges that I faced were not there. Then she got into the job after taking oath. She followed the footsteps of her predecessor, one step at a time, but now she also has demonstrated that she can be her own person. And the one thing that I notice with pleasure is her decisiveness in making decisions that she thinks will benefit her nation.
Thank you for that. And Given the circumstances the world's facing at the moment with the pandemic, I did want to ask you, what are COVID circumstances like in Malawi? How are you experiencing the pandemic? Obviously, the pandemic has had this impact in Tanzania with the loss of the president. So can you give us a sense of how you're feeling and seeing the pandemic and what it might in particular be meaning for women?
Yeah, by the way, Tanzania have said that their president died of a heart problem, and there's evidence that shows that he had a heart problem. So whether it was the underlying factor, we don't know. But I hope you know that also my son died last February, and he too had heart problem as well. And then when COVID came, then that underlying problem made him more vulnerable than other members of the family. So we don't know here in Africa that President Magufuli died of COVID. That's number one. Yeah. But what I find about COVID is what pains me most are the 4 results, negative effects, such as that poverty has worsened, teen pregnancies and child marriages have worsened. In Malawi alone, 200,000. And according to UNESCO, 9 million girls have dropped out of school during COVID alone. Gender-based violence has worsened. But what really breaks my heart, myself, is the fact that the other diseases that break my heart, such as cancers, female cancers. Here in Malawi, cervical cancer, which is very easily traceable, very easily treated. 1,400 women in the last 12 months alone were diagnosed, and they will never get treatment because we don't have radiotherapy, because our focus now is on COVID-19. So that is one area. Those are the problems that we are facing. But the latest one that we have noticed, and this is what has forced me to co-sign a letter that we wrote to President Biden, and that is to say that the WTO should ease the what do we call it, intellectual property, so that other parts of the world can manufacture the vaccine. The tragedy is that while America now can even take off their masks, while UK has vaccinated as many people as possible, a country like Malawi has only vaccinated 350,000. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, we threw away 15,000 in the bush, burned them down, because when they got there, they were almost expired. Now, if Africa is not vaccinating at the same rate, mutations and variants or whatever they call them all over the place, even when Europe and America are vaccinating their whole population, this is a time bomb. Because what is going to happen later, we will be back to square one, because we will not have achieved anything. So now India was doing the best that they could to support other developing nations with vaccines. But what is happening now is that they are in a mess themselves. They have to worry about their own populations. So it is really, really sad what is happening. So some of us are trying to run around to address those issues. The gains that we had made, we have lost them, most of them, especially in the health sector. And so we have to start rebuilding once again. Yeah.
My sincere condolences on the loss of your son, such tragic news. And I think everybody would be very much agreeing with you that we need to vaccinate the world. I mean, the evidence is just so clear that none of us are going to be safe until we're all safe. And that means that vaccines have to be distributed, and that the backlog of healthcare needs is going to be critical, because health services have been understandably so focused on COVID, but it does mean that there are other diseases, including preventable conditions that are taking lives, particularly women's lives. I do want to just divert very briefly onto a question that's come in from the audience, which is, do you have any advice for women who are considering entering public life? If you were speaking to your 20-year-old self about going into politics, what words of advice would you give?
Well, I can only answer about Africa because I don't know about other parts of the world. But in Africa, all of us that are urban-based, if we are going to stand for elections where we were born, then it's 2 years that you must give yourself to go back. Because like in my case, I was born in the village, but I didn't grow up in the village because my father was working in the Malawi police band in town, 15 kilometers away. So I could only come home every weekend. So that being the case, you want to come back and acquaint yourself with the communities, work with the communities, get them to get to know you and to know how sincere you are and how genuine you are. Because when you make up your mind that you want to become a politician, if you're going to look at it as a job, then I don't know how to do it. But I'm talking about if you want to get into politics in order to serve, then you need to get to fall in love with the people that you are going to represent. And that means going back there, getting acquainted to them and getting to know their challenges and their problems and having a very clear plan on how you are going to help them address the issues that bother them. Then you are a genuine leader. So that would be my advice. Get the people first.
And I'm going to
that are going to select, they're going who are going to elect you in the first place. They are the ones who are going to elect you. And they must know what they're electing. And I have found that it is tough. Most of our countries like Malawi, there's no affirmative action. So you have to compete with men on equal ground. So you might also need to consider resources. You must build your own financial base that will allow you to go there. Because when you get to the villages, you want to invite chiefs for a workshop and tell them your manifesto, the women separately, the youth. And so what I did when I was the gender minister, we approached the government of Norway. And they're the only ones that understood what we were saying. Because most of our other partners, when they come, they want to give us training. You can't give me training on how to campaign in my village because you don't know my tradition. Yeah, when you tell me to be assertive, to look the chief in the eye, that's the best way of losing the election. But you want to give me resources that will help me talk and persuade the voter that they should vote for me. And the Norwegian government was the first in Malawi to give money to candidates, regardless of what party. And we went from 7 women to 45 because of that program.
It's fantastic. We also had a question about the way in which you need to engage with the grassroots. So you've answered that in the answer that you've just given. So we're getting through questions here. But I did also want to read just one contribution that's come in from the chat. It's from Ambassador Akua Senior Dansua, who says, greetings from Ghana. Thanks for a great interview. The time has come for African women to bind together and support women candidates in any position whose policies and programs are supportive of women, children, societal good and fighting corruption. So lovely message there coming in on our chat line. We also have an audience question from Sonam, who is from Bhutan, asking about how women can promote clean politics in the face of corruption. And I would note that for those that are interested, there is research from the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, which shows that more women in politics is associated with less corruption. In answering this question, can you tell us about how you've dealt with allegations of corruption that have been raised by your political opponents? Some of that is also being raised on the chat line, the way in which allegations get used as a mechanism for intimidation during the political process.
Yes, indeed, and it's hard. I would also recommend to them to read Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's book that she has written. I think the title is "Fighting Corruption is Dangerous." I think it's a book that worth reading, because that is why most leaders, they will avoid fighting it, because they just think it's not worth it. Because at the end of the day, instead of you being a victor, you become a victim. But for me as a woman, and what I've found in most women leaders, is that they will not cover up. They will fight it. They will ignore advice not to, because that is the root of all evil. Our people in Africa are suffering because of corruption. The schools are not equipped. The hospitals are not equipped. So you have to address that problem. You have to fight it. And even if you don't finish the fight, you hope that one day another leader will come and continue from where you stopped. And that's what has happened in Malawi. When I left, there was so much talk, or you don't know clearly who committed what, but you must stand your ground. And so in my government arrested 72 thieves who are currently, some of them still serving jail time. And now this president that I supported, that we are in a grand coalition, he also has just arrested 46 people. So another leader will come and continue from where you left. But it is necessary for you to do. In my case, I was lucky, because the European Union ambassador is the one who alerted me by the name of, what was his name? I forget now. And he approached me and said, and I was just asking him over a cup of tea, would you tell me if you suspected there was corruption? Because I had heard about it before I became president. And so my question was genuinely asking, would you let me know? Because sometimes donors get to know things that you don't know. And when you are in State House, people will only tell you what they want you to hear. So he said, yes, but I think I hope you know that the IFMIS is being abused. IFMIS is Integrated Financial Management System, which had been installed in 2005 and had been abused all that time. This is now 2013. And he said to me, it's being abused. You should check. And so being a woman and being naive, I made an announcement to the nation. Alerted even the thieves. I made an announcement to the nation. I said, I've been alerted, but if I get you, you're going to jail. And whether you are my husband, you are my son, you are my relative, you're going to jail. And so that's when we started with the investigations. I appointed a committee of cabinet ministers to look at all that we can do, to close up to make sure that doesn't happen again. But I also appointed a policeman who was an expert in criminal investigation to lead a team to investigate thoroughly. So that's why we were able, by the end of the day, to have 72 people arrested. And so the question was, how can we women make sure that we promote clean governments, we fight corruption? Is to be on top of matters and to be fearless, because it's not easy. Because before you say anything, as the other lady rightly said, they will smear it back onto you so that you shut up. But you cannot shut up. In any case, even if it means you leaving State House, it doesn't matter. There is life beyond State House. But corruption, we must fight. Now we have found that corruption is global, because the African Union instituted a research by the former president of South Africa, President Thabo Mbeki, who has found that $80 billion is leaving our shores every year. So it is not going back to Africa. Our minerals and our natural resources are leaving our continent, $80 billion worth of every year. So it is a global problem. My request has been the West and the East and the North and the South must all get united to fight this evil.
Thank you for that. I've got a question also from our audience. I think you'll like this one, Joyce. It's from Shirley Randall. And she says that she's lived in Rwanda and she has friends who are women parliamentarians. And she goes on to say some of them have supportive husbands who share the work in their families. Other women go home after their parliamentary day and have to still be responsible for all the domestic work and child rearing. I knew you'd like this question. Do you see this happening in Malawi, and are there any solutions to this problem, to the sharing of domestic labour? And this question has been with us sort of always, but it's got a COVID dimension too, which is research very clearly shows that the extra labour that happened because of lockdown and homeschooling, that women disproportionately had to step up to that extra domestic burden. But how would you respond to Shirley's question?
Yeah, but I think, I don't know where she comes from, but for Africa, we are programmed to believe that it is us who have to do the bring up of the babies and the cooking, the household chores. It's up to the wife. Now, it is going to take a lot of education. That's why I said, I think Equal is recommending that we start teaching our children at age 3 about rights. That is also included in there. Because the boy child, and most of it is us women who are the perpetrators, because we are the ones who tell our boy child, you get out of the kitchen, this is not your place. You can't cook, you can't cry. Don't cry like a girl. So the boy child grows hard, and the boy child doesn't know how to cook because he has never been taught. And the boy child doesn't know how to get to the kitchen. He has never been there. So it is a change of mindset that I've been pushing for all along. You can't just expect today, Richard Banda, my husband, to be in the kitchen. He doesn't even know how to boil water. Because that's just their upbringing. So that's the work we have to do. And I have given speeches all over about how mothers must get involved. We have an advantage because the kitchen is our office. We can make sure the boy's child is welcome there. And we can make sure that we inculcate in the boy child from a very young age that it is okay to cook, and it is okay to help with household chores, and it is also okay to cry.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm conscious that time is growing short, but I've got one more audience question and then one final question for you. The audience question is from Laura, who's from the National Democratic Institute, and she wants to ask you if you could share one thing that kept motivating you to overcome gender barriers in politics. You know, you said before that when you were president, for example, the opposition were using a lot of abuse. I know, Joyce, from talking to you when Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala and I wrote our book on women and leadership, I know from talking to you then that you had some very sexist insults hurled at you. What did enable you to keep going?
I don't know what is it about politics. I don't know how to explain it, because my sister has said to me, what goes on in your mind? I think when you have assumed the position of leadership and you are carrying a whole nation on your head, all the women and girls are looking up to you. You realize very quickly that if you weaken down, you're letting them down. I have reached a stage where if anybody is abusing me, and I know that I have my rights there, I will fight, not for my own sake, but for the sake of all those women and girls that are watching me. So for you, it is to know, for me, it was the realization that I can't afford to lose, and I can't afford to back away, because if I do that, I'm letting down all the women of Malawi. And it's not only being president that I have been first. I've been first to head an organization. I've been head to form a foundation in Malawi. I was the first woman to head a statutory corporation in Malawi. So I have been first. I was the first vice president in Malawi. So when you are first that, you get numerous letters from young girls. In fact, to young girls in Malawi. In Malawi, nobody can call you Julia, and nobody call me Joyce in Malawi by our tradition. You are Madam Julia Gillard because you have been prime minister before. But the young girls in Malawi, I'm just Joyce Banda. I'm just Joyce, I'm just their friend. I'm just Joyce Banda because that's the person they would want to grow up to become. So you can't let them down. So you can't cow down, you can't weaken, you can't give up, you can't step aside. You have to stay the course. The most important is for you to stay in your lane. So nobody can say you crossed over to my lane. Stay on your lane and just stay the course and just focus on what needs to be done.
Thank you. They're great words. And for a final question, what makes you optimistic about gender equality in the future? I want to leave people feeling that, and I do genuinely believe that whatever the struggles we face, that we are moving forward. What makes you optimistic?
I think for me as an African woman, what makes me so hopeful and optimistic is the fact, how we have continued to rise as African women and what we have been able to achieve. I mean, when my very good friend GIWL was starting this journey towards WTO, the first question was, is she sure she can do it? But look how she stood firm and focused and one step at a time marched all the way to that desk. That's African women. And that is what gives me hope. It gives me hope that with our approach, as long as we don't divert to start copying other types of feminism, that's what I say. I don't know how to call it, because ours is an African type of feminism, and that's bearing fruit. And if anybody doesn't know how we are doing, doesn't want to accept, well, we have had 6 presidents in Africa, but we had leaders before colonization. And we have 63% in Rwandan parliament, and we have 50% cabinets on the continent of Africa. So nobody can say we are not achieving anything. But what we need to do is form a lot of networks, work together. The African Women Leaders Network is one such organization that is intergenerational. We have a younger committee and an older committee working to support one another, to make sure that we get as many women as possible into leadership positions.
It's a fantastic note to end on. Joyce, thank you so much for an intriguing conversation and for the upbeat words at the end. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined us from right around the world, and for the generosity of your comments on our chat line and for your questions. Thank you for joining this webinar from the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's College London, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event. Thank you very much.